If you guys have an iPhone, the Photos app on iPhones does this thing where it like curates automatic albums, photo albums, and these are based on things like what time of the year it is, what season it is, things like travel recaps and event recaps. And I was looking at mine kind of recently, and one particular album stood out, and it's titled At the Show in Los Angeles, and it's dated from June 12th, 2018. And it's about 30 photos curating photos from E3 2018. I was looking through these photos and going down memory lane, and it's crazy to see some of the games that were featured here. So I see photos of like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because that was the year it was coming out. Fortnite had some really crazy booths because that was the year it started to really take off and become such a cultural moment in gaming. I see pictures of like Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. The Fortnite Pro-Am with Marshmallow is in here. I literally don't remember doing this, but I have a picture here with the devs of Mega Man. And I really don't remember this moment, but I have pictures of Hideo Kojima on a panel talking about Death Stranding and miscellaneous other photos of me just going around the expo and taking pictures with Ratchet and Clank, Astrobot. And it is just so interesting to look through this album because obviously, like many things in society that went through COVID, E3 was one of those things that went through the time vortex of 2020 and COVID, and what was spit out was something that fundamentally changed. And for gaming, it was this mid-year period in the summer where publishers and studios would announce their next big upcoming games. When I attended E3 in 2018 and 2019, I did not know it was going to be the final years of the event before its inevitable death. And we all know about E3's impact, and we kind of remember it in a way that I think is similar to how we have nostalgic memories for like things in the 90s or the 2000s. We remember them so fondly and vividly in a way that reminds me of like how I think of like certain retro games or like the communities I bonded with in my old MMOs, that kind of vibe. One of my biggest core memories when it came to E3 is when I watched the premiere trailer of Breath of the Wild. I was absolutely enamored by that trailer. I felt like the world was so fascinating, the music was incredible, and I was still in school at this time, so I felt like, you know, what if this is the game that kind of gets me back into gaming, because I completely fell off with really playing any games while I was in college. If you actually search on YouTube E3 trailer reactions, you see so many videos with millions of views of audience reactions to the premiere of these trailers for these iconic and legendary games. And I think that was a huge part of E3 and E3 culture, just collective excitement over these games that were to come. But as we know, E3 is now long gone. It's crazy because like I feel like I can remember E3 like it was just yesterday, but it's been like over 6 years at this point that we had an in-person E3. And now we have Summer Game Fest and other showcases to replace this summer of gaming period. And I think this year especially, SGF has proven that it's here to stay, and E3 is a relic of the past. As someone who got to experience E3 in its final years, but also got to experience Summer Game Fest in a new way this year for the first time, I got to go to Summer Game Fest Playdays, which is kind of like a mini industry con, kind of like a mini E3 right after the main show this year. I feel like I have perspective on both events, and it's really interesting to compare the two to see how we approach this period of summer now compared to then. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about in today's video. If you're new here, hi, my name is Anna and welcome to the channel. On this channel, we talk about all things gaming. We talk about things happening in the industry, the community, and everything in between. Happy summer, everybody. Can you believe it's already June? Because I cannot. I say this every year, but I feel like this year is going by so fast. I feel like we were just playing Resident Evil Requiem back in like February and it's already June. I can't believe that. For me, summer is always marked by all the festivities and events that are happening in Los Angeles, which is where I live. There's a lot of things happening in LA during the summer. There's things like Summer Game Fest and Anime Expo and just like these cons and like expo events happening, and and it's a really fun time, which is why summer is my favorite season, besides the fact that I just love warm weather. And in that aspect, these events are always kicked off by Summer Game Fest, or in the past, it was always E3. And this year's Summer Game Fest, I feel like, was the best Summer Game Fest that I've personally experienced. Not that there's been that many since E3's cancellation, and I'm not like particularly keeping a score, but even just comparing it to last year, I felt like the excitement this year was exceptional. Man, there's so many announcements that happened this year that it was like really hard to even keep up with. And I'm not talking about just Summer Game Fest, the show, but the entire week encompassing all the showcases, the events that I got to attend. I wasn't making content super seriously from the very start of Summer Game Fest, so I think it was only like last year that I started really keeping track of what games are announced during this time. But even compared to last year, I feel like last year I was particularly only excited for 3 main titles, which was Resident Evil Requiem, Persona 4 Revival's announcement, and I believe the release date for Silent Hill F. And then a couple indie games and smaller games were announced last year as well. Compared to that, this year just felt 5 times bigger, 5 times better. It was just so much going on that I couldn't believe it. I was on a high for that whole week because I was like, this is the most exciting gaming has felt in a long time, or at least this year. So quick personal highlights for me from this year's Summer Game Fest. I'm not going into detail for every single showcase because I think I kind of did that in my last video. I posted a vlog attending Summer Game Fest playdays, but also just talking through my reactions and overall thoughts on all the showcases that happened. So you can watch that video there to get more details on that. But as a quick recap, I will say these are the titles that I'm particularly excited for. So on Sony's State of Play, I was excited for Until Dawn 2, Silent Hill Townfall finally getting a release date. From the Summer Game Fest show itself, Final Fantasy VII Revelation, Resident Evil Veronica. At the Xbox Showcase, Persona 4 Revival's release date, and Persona 6's announcement. From the Nintendo Direct, the Ocarina of Time remake, Kingdom Hearts 4 footage, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave getting a release date, Orbital's getting a release date. I think those are the major titles that I am very looking forward to. I think I'm generally being more selective this year overall of what games I play. So even then, I feel like the titles that I just mentioned are on the conservative side of things that I will probably be playing, but there's so many other announcements that I know were a big deal and people are excited for. So games like Alien Isolation 2, the new Tomb Raider game, Guild Wars 3, The Wolf Among Us 2, Wolverine and God of War Lao Fei, I think that's how you pronounce it, at the State of Play, a new Spyro game, Fable getting a release date, Xenoblade Genesis, Deltarune Chapter 5, and the list even goes on more than that with the smaller showcases that happen in between the main shows. So things like Fields of Mystria getting its 1.0 announcement from the Wholesome Games Direct. There were so many games that were announced that it truly felt like there was something for everybody. There's gotta be some game that was announced at the beginning of this month that someone was excited for. And because there was just this like sheer volume of games that were announced, I felt like there was a collective high amongst the gaming community where we were all just so excited to play these games. I even made a video following up saying like, dude, I love being someone who loves video games because there's always something to look forward to. It really feels like life is worth living. And I got a bunch of comments under that video of people feeling the same way, saying like, just mentioning a variety of titles they were excited for. And the fact that these presentations happened like back to back to back to back just made this week feel much more grand. I also really liked how the main show for Summer Game Fest felt more like a show than a stream, because the past Summer Game Fest, I feel like it wasn't really worth attending because it felt like paying money to watch a live stream in a theater. But I feel like this year, like it felt more like an actual show. There were guests that came on stage and surprises that happened on stage. In that way, it felt more like the Game Awards, I think. And it also adds to the whole nostalgic feeling of the E3 shows that used to happen. Along with seeing all these digital showcases, again, I got to go to Playdays, which added to the overall feeling that this felt like the most E3 SGF has ever felt. I thought it was just me because I got to attend the industry events, but I think I got a lot of comments too saying like this is the most E3 that SGF has ever felt. I got a few comments saying like E3 is back, guys. Like this is the closest we're gonna get to reviving E3, because this is what E3 days were all about. It was all about collective community excitement over video games and their announcements and premieres and being able to experience all of that together. On a personal level, for me, E3 was always a childhood dream. I always wanted to attend E3 because it used to be industry exclusive, and I think when I was in school, I always wanted to attend E3 because I really wanted to make a career out of gaming and make that a possibility. And I think E3 was kind of a signal that I was getting my foot in the door because it was a big event. It was a huge event back then. It was a big deal because it was one of the largest gaming conventions in the world. When I graduated school, I was working at a tech company and I was really pushing for gaming to be a bigger part of our strategy, but I think gaming just wasn't really on the radar quite yet, which is funny because the app that I was working for was TikTok, and now gaming gets trillions of views on that app. So it's quite ironic, really. They thought that back in the day when I was really pushing for it. But anyways, but yeah, for me, it was always a dream to attend E3 because I really wanted to be part of the industry. I really wanted to be more part of the community. And I also really loved events. I even considered being like an event planner at one point in my career, and being able to experience all of that was just something that I really wanted to do. So when I got to actually attend E3, it was a very special moment for me. I got to go after it was open to the public, but even then, I was like so excited to attend. I think that the best way to describe my E3 experience was I didn't actually get to attend any like trailer premieres or showcases that happen on these big stages. I just attended like the con itself. And the closest thing that I think that experience was like is attending like a PAX West. I felt like when I attended PAX West last year, that was like pretty similar to how E3 was when I went. So like I said, I got to go to E3 2018, and then I also mentioned that I got to go to E3 2019, which is the last in-person event that they did. And when I looked through those photos, again, so interesting to see the time capsule that these photos are now. I see pictures of like Monster Hunter World and the big statue they brought out. Nintendo had some really cool booths. So they had activations around Pokemon Sword and Shield. They also had the coolest exhibit around their new Luigi's Mansion game. They basically like made like a haunted house maze, and they even had like hotel workers dressed up to be part of the staff working that booth, and then you could play the demo inside of the booths itself. I see cosplayers in front of Final Fantasy VII Remake signs. Fortnite still had a huge presence here, and I see a picture of Persona 5 Royal, and it's saying coming to the West in 2020. It's so interesting just looking at all this. And that was it. That was the year before COVID really hit hard and E3 had to shut down. As a quick recap of why E3 shut down, first, it was basically that a lot of these like major studios and publishers like Sony and Nintendo were pulling out of the show and expo because they literally didn't see the point of paying top dollar to be included in these shows when they could do their own digital showcases, like their own directs and state of play. So it just didn't really make sense for their strategy to attend these shows anymore when they could just do it themselves. And then I think COVID shutting down in-person events was like the final nail in the coffin, and they didn't really have a case to revive E3 after the COVID lockdown restrictions lifted. Jeff clearly saw what wasn't working for E3 and took advantage of the gaps. I don't think Summer Game Fest is meant to replace E3 one-to-one. I think it was more like Jeff saw the problems that E3 had and what led to its discontinuation and tried to improve upon it with his own event. So that's why we have the whole strategy with Summer Game Fest that Jeff has established, where it's mostly digital showcases that these publishers and major studios can run on their own, like the State of Play being independently run by Sony and the Nintendo Direct, Xbox having a completely different theater presentation. But at this point, it's clear that Summer Game Fest has its own really big influence. Jeff is able to work with these major publishers and studios to have all of these showcases in the same week. So I think it's really smart that there is this format where the week is like all encompassing, considered Summer Game Fest, while still giving those major studios and publishers their own independent showcases where they don't really have to pay anything or really do anything for a separate brand or expo or be part of that. I think another part that is really underrated of all this moving online is Summer Game Fest is better able to spotlight more underrepresented and marginalized communities compared to E3. So just looking at the events under the Summer Game Fest website and all the partner showcases, I see things like the Mixed Summer Game Showcase, Black Voices in Gaming, Latin American Games Showcase, Women-Led Games, Day of the Devs, Southeast Asian Games Showcase, Wholesome Games Direct, Story Rich Showcase, Green Games Showcase, the Gaming Pride Parade, Frosty Games Fest, Indie Games Showcase. So I like the fact that because we went digital, these partner showcases and like indie games, smaller games that probably wouldn't have the budget to participate in something like an E3 are better represented because of the nature of Summer Game Fest's format. But there's trade-offs to both, right? I think like the reason why E3 had such a presence and a big impact in the gaming community was because it was a large scale event with so much audience reaction to these like crazy trailer reveals and being able to go to the expo floor with hundreds, thousands of other people. Playdays is a really interesting part of all this now that I've also attended. I actually didn't even know that Playdays was a thing until this year when I was invited, but it definitely felt like a mini E3 to me, just much more smaller and industry focused because a lot of the people attending there are content creators, journalists, gaming outlets, magazines. With a smaller event like this, they're still able to take advantage of the fact that a lot of content creators, journalists, media outlets that have a lot of influence in the gaming space are able to have hands-on time and talk about these upcoming games and demos while still keeping the cost down for a lot of these publishers and studios to opt in. So I think they're purposely keeping it pretty small and tight-knit so they can keep the advantage of having these studios and games participate while having some of the most influential outlets in gaming still talk about their games. It is kind of sad to look at it for me because like I think part of E3 wasn't just about like playing the games, it was being able to meet people on a much larger scale. Of course, I got to experience that at SGF Playdays. E3 is just, it feels more like a celebration of gaming when it's on like a public scale, when I get to see hundreds and thousands of other people get to play the same demos I got to play. But I guess that experience is replicable at like a PAX West or other expo events, not necessarily E3. So I guess my point is like, I understand why E3 discontinued. I feel like there's clear business decisions that didn't really make sense for it to keep going. A part of me is mourning the kind of impact E3 had and the iconic moments it birthed. But with the way Summer Game Fest has kind of filled the gaps that E3 couldn't, I am looking forward to the evolution of it and how it plans to grow from this point forward, because this year had me much more optimistic compared to the previous years of whether it feels like E3 is kind of back. So now with all the announcements that happened from the show, from that whole week, I think the rest of this year is looking pretty crazy. I made a separate video talking about how I think September onwards is going to be absolutely insane for gaming. Just going to be a crazy, crazy busy season of all these new games coming out. Just September alone, there's like 3 games I plan to personally play, and that doesn't even include games like Wolverine. So there's just so much going on this fall, and it happens every year. For some reason, fall is just very busy, but I guess we just have like a good problem to have kind of situation where there's like too many games to choose from for the rest of the year. And looking forward into 2027, that is already being set up to be quite an interesting year for gaming too. I can't believe I get to play Resident Evil Veronica, Persona 4 Revival, and Final Fantasy VII Revelations all in the same year. It kind of gives me flashbacks to like a 2023 year, and I'm super excited for that. But that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. What do you guys think? What do you feel about like E3 now that it's long gone, and Summer Game Fest basically being the replacement for it. How did you feel about the announcements this year? What games are you looking forward to playing in the coming year or the rest of the year? I would love to know your thoughts as always in the comments below, but until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!